video, I want to talk about a trend that I've come to see among conservatives, or what I call big government conservatism, big government conservatives. Now, usually those terms are supposed to be completely opposite, but where might they be lacking in holding up to that value of having minimal government, of having, the person be free? Well, how about let's start with the military. America has a huge military. That's part of the government. That is a government program. That is a centrally planned socialist program. I'm sorry. Well, no, I'm not. But the American military is one of the largest socialist programs in the world. It's like $750 billion a year, and it's planned by a room of politicians. How are we going to run national defense? Conservatives say they want to cut the budget, but they want to spend trillions of dollars on wars. That's not small government. That's huge government. And historically, during war times, that's when governments tend to grow. That's when they tend to take over parts of the economy. That's whenever they tend to pass a lot of laws. It's whenever they get higher taxes. It's during times of war. And there's also no reason to believe that only the government can run security. There are a lot of private security forces. There are a lot of mercenaries available. There are a lot of insurance companies that run private security forces, that run private protection. That's a possibility. We don't need to have a government military. We don't need socialist defense like conservatives advocate. They say they don't want the redistribution of wealth. That's stealing. Just like the British healthcare system. That's stealing. You take from the taxpayer and you give to the bureaucrat in the National Healthcare Service over there. That's redistribution of wealth. That's bad. But over here in America, when you take money from one person and you give it to a soldier, suddenly it's heroic. Suddenly that redistribution of wealth, that particular socialism, very patriotic. It's different. It's an exception. In America, we can do that sort of thing. And it's not just in the military, not just in areas of defense and security. It's areas like a lot of conservatives support the right to having an education. America's public schools are a very good example of socialism and the failures of socialism. Running streets and roads, government runs streets and roads, socialist planned roads. We have Social Security. Not exactly an example of socialism per se, but it's another example of big government. And I'm sorry, Paul Ryan, that doesn't make you a fiscal conservative to want to cut Social Security by about 2%, I believe, is what he proposed. All of these things can be handled by the market, which conservatives normally are so enthusiastic about. Oh, the market, free enterprise, get government out of it. Well, yes, I agree. You privatize the streets and roads, privatize our security, privatize education, and that's when the market forces will come in. If any business does not do a good job, protecting its clients from criminals or terrorists, it'll go out of business. If the streets and roads are run poorly, they'll lose customers, it'll go out of business. If the school does not deliver results with its students, people will stop attending. Parents will stop sending their children to that school. And also in the areas of things like religion and morality, what do conservatives want? They want to get the Bible into public schools, which, as I've said before, that's another example is public schools. It's an example of socialism. Getting the Bible into public schools, it's going to be literally socialist Christianity. It's going to be centrally planned Christianity. That doesn't sound good. That sounds like something the government's going to manipulate and use to its own advantage. We have socialist morality that a lot of conservatives advocate. What's socialist morality? Well, when literally you have a board of planners setting out what you can and cannot do, what you as a person are allowed to do and allowed not to do. We have the war on drugs is an example of moral socialism or socialist morality. The government says this is not allowed, and then tries to crack down on drugs. It just creates a lot of black markets, a lot of violence, a lot of gangs, and is a bigger failure than alcohol prohibition. I'm sorry, Ronald Reagan was a socialist. This is why I think it would be very good for a lot of conservatives to come into libertarianism, because I think the strategy is different, but it's towards a similar goal. It's towards the goals of individual responsibility, of free market capitalism, and just freedom. Our strategy is just different. We don't want to use government to promote freedom. We think that's an oxymoron. We want it to be done through private property, through self-ownership, and through the free market.